Margaret Blackwood stood at the front of the funeral hall, her eyes locked on the coffin that held her only son. The room was packed, hundreds of people crying, whispering, even quietly taking photos. Everyone had shown up to witness the funeral of Daniel Blackwood, the young billionaire whose sudden death had shocked the world. But Margaret didn't shed a single tear. Her hand stayed tight around a brown envelope hidden deep inside her purse. Inside it were documents powerful enough to stop this funeral cold. Documents that could reveal a truth no one in this room was ready to hear. Near the coffin stood Vanessa, Daniel's wife. She clutched a microphone, her voice trembling as she cried. "My darling Daniel was taken far too soon, he was my everything." People in the crowd wiped their eyes. "Poor woman," someone whispered. "At least he left her all his money." Margaret's jaw clenched. At the front, the priest spoke softly about peace, heaven, and eternal rest. In just 2 minutes, they would seal the coffin and bury her son forever. Margaret rose to her feet. The room fell silent. Every head turned. The priest stopped mid-sentence. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said gently, "would you like to say something?" Margaret walked forward. Her heels struck the marble floor, click, 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 each step echoing through the quiet hall. She turned toward the crowd, then fixed her eyes directly on Vanessa. "My son did not die of natural causes," Margaret said, her voice steady and sharp. "Daniel was murdered." Gasps rippled through the room. Someone screamed. Vanessa shot to her feet, her face pale. "Your grief is clouding your judgment." "I am not confused," Margaret cut in, her tone cold as ice. "I have proof that you, Vanessa, poisoned my son, to steal his money." The room erupted. Reporters rushed forward. Voices clashed. Chaos exploded. "Hello friends, welcome to our story. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Also, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, New York, London, maybe South Africa or Jamaica. We'd love to know." Margaret hadn't always lived a life of wealth or power. 25 years ago, she was just an ordinary woman married to a kind man named Thomas. He worked as an engineer, while Margaret stayed home caring for their baby boy, Daniel. They lived in a tiny apartment filled with worn-out furniture and a roof that leaked every time it rained. They didn't have much, but they were happy. Then one rainy Tuesday, everything fell apart. Thomas was driving home from work when a truck ran a red light. The crash killed him instantly. He was just 29 years old. Margaret was 26, with a 1-year-old baby in her arms. No job. No savings. No one to turn to. Her parents had passed away years earlier, and Thomas's family blamed her for his death, claiming he had worked himself to exhaustion trying to support her. Everyone expected her to fall apart. The landlord warned, "You'll never keep up with rent. You should find somewhere cheaper." Thomas's boss shook his head. "We can't hire you. You don't have experience." Even the neighbors whispered behind her back. "Poor thing, she won't last. She'll end up on the streets." But Margaret looked at her baby boy, asleep in his crib, and made a decision. She would not fail. She refused to let her son grow up poor, or pitted. Using the small life insurance payout from Thomas, $5,000, Margaret started a business. She bought used furniture, repaired it, and sold it for profit. She worked while Daniel napped. She worked after he fell asleep. She worked every single day without rest. In her first year, she earned $10,000. The second year, $30,000. By the third year, she opened her first small shop. People laughed. A furniture store? In this economy? Run by a woman? She'll be broke in 6 months. They were wrong. Margaret had something rare. She could walk into any business and instantly know what it needed. She negotiated like a pro. She could spot a lie from a mile away. She was sharp. Tough. Nearly impossible to deceive. By the time Daniel turned 5, she owned 3 stores. By 10, she owned a factory. By 15, she ran an entire chain of furniture stores across 5 states. And she didn't stop there. She acquired companies. She invested in new technology. She made international deals. Soon, Margaret became one of the richest women in the world. But success taught her a hard truth. People lie when money is involved. They pretend to care. They smile in your face while plotting behind your back. They will do anything, to take what you have. So Margaret learned to trust carefully. She asked questions. She investigated everything. And she listened closely to the quiet voice in her mind that whispered, "Something isn't right." That voice had saved her more times than she could count, from frauds, scammers, and fake partners. But there was one person she never questioned. One person she trusted completely. Daniel. Her son was her world. Everything she built, every company, every deal, every dollar, was for him. But Daniel was her complete opposite. Where Margaret saw danger, Daniel saw opportunity. Where she was cautious, he was open-hearted. Where she questioned people, he believed in them. "Mom, not everyone is out to get us," Daniel would say with a laugh. "Maybe not everyone," Margaret would reply. "But enough that we need to be careful." Daniel would just smile and shake his head. To him, his mother was too suspicious. Too controlling. Always expecting the worst. And maybe, he had a point. Maybe years of struggle had made Margaret too guarded. Or maybe, that quiet voice in her head, the one that had protected her for years, was trying to warn her again. About something bigger. Something dangerous. Something that was about to tear her entire world apart. It was a warm spring evening when Daniel walked in, eyes shining with excitement. Margaret was in her home office, reviewing documents for a new deal, when she heard the front door open. Then came fast footsteps rushing up the stairs. "Mom. Mom, are you home?" She smiled. At 28 years old, he still sounded like a little boy sometimes. "In my office, sweetheart." The door flew open. Daniel stood there, slightly out of breath, his face flushed, but smiling wider than she'd ever seen. "I met someone," he said. Margaret paused, her hands still on the keyboard. "Someone?" "A woman. Her name is Vanessa." Daniel dropped into the chair across from her desk, his hands moving wildly as he spoke. "Mom, she's amazing. Smart, funny, beautiful." "Slow down," Margaret said with a small chuckle. "Where did you meet her?" "At that art gallery downtown, you know, the one that opened last month. I was looking at this huge blue painting with stars, and she came up beside me. We started talking, and we just clicked." He leaned forward, eyes glowing. "We talked for 3 hours, Mom. 3 hours. I didn't even realize the place was closing until security kicked us out." Margaret studied his face. He had dated before, nice girls, most of them, but she had never seen him like this. "That sounds special," she said carefully. "What does she do?" "She's an art consultant. She helps wealthy clients buy paintings and sculptures. She travels all over, Paris, Tokyo, Dubai, everywhere. An art consultant. Someone who worked closely with rich clients. Someone who understood how to charm them, how to guide their spending." That quiet voice in Margaret's mind whispered again. "Be careful." "I'd like to meet her," Margaret said. "You will." "I'm seeing her again tomorrow. We're going to that Italian restaurant you like. Maybe you could." "No. Not yet," Margaret said quickly. "Take your time. Get to know her first, then introduce us." Daniel's smile faded. "Mom, don't start." "Start what?" "You know exactly what. The thing you always do, digging into every person I date, looking for problems, trying to push them away." "I'm just trying to." "I'm not a kid anymore," Daniel said, rising from his chair. His voice rose, firm and insistent. "I'm 28 years old, Mom. I can judge people for myself. Of course you can, Margaret said calmly, her voice steady. But being careful isn't wrong, especially when you're a Blackwood. Especially when money is involved. Not everyone cares about money, Mom, Daniel said, his eyes shining. Some people just want love. Real love, like you and Dad had. A sharp pain cut through Margaret's chest. He was right. She and Thomas had loved each other deeply, truly. But that was before the money, before the empire, before everything changed. Just, bring her to dinner soon, Margaret said softly. Please. Daniel's expression softened. Okay, Mom. I promise. He left the office, and Margaret sat alone, thoughts swirling. That little voice whispered again, something's wrong. She shook her head. Maybe she was overthinking. Maybe Vanessa was exactly what she seemed, a kind woman who loved art and happened to meet her son. Maybe. 6 months passed. 6 months of Daniel talking endlessly about Vanessa. 6 months of Vanessa said this, Vanessa thinks that, Vanessa loves this restaurant. But Margaret still hadn't met her. Every time she asked, Daniel had an excuse. Vanessa's traveling. She's busy with work. She's sick. She's helping her mother. The excuses piled up, heavy stones pressing on Margaret's chest. Finally, one Tuesday afternoon, Daniel walked into Margaret's downtown office. He wasn't smiling this time. He looked tense, nervous. Mom. I need to talk to you about something important. Margaret put down her pen. What is it? Daniel pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it. Inside lay a diamond ring, sparkling like a tiny star in the sunlight. I'm going to ask Vanessa to marry me, tonight. Margaret froze. Daniel, slow down. You've been dating for 6 months, and I still haven't met her. Don't you think you should wait? At least let me meet her first. I knew you'd say that, Daniel said, jaw tight. You'd find a reason for me to wait. But I love her, Mom. More than anything. And she loves me. Margaret stood, voice firm. How do you know she loves you? Has she ever been to your apartment? Does she know you volunteer at the children's hospital? Does she know you hate fancy parties, or does she only know about the money? Daniel's face flushed. That's not fair. It's a fair question, Margaret said. You think everyone who gets close to me just wants money. You've thought that about everyone I've ever dated. But you're wrong about Vanessa. She's different. Then let me meet her. Just one dinner before you propose. If she's as wonderful as you say, what's the harm? Daniel stared at his mother. Silence stretched between them. Finally, he nodded. Fine, dinner tomorrow night at the house. But Mom, please, try to like her. Don't interrogate her. Don't investigate her. Just give her a chance. Margaret nodded. I promise to be fair. After Daniel left, she sat in her office, staring out at the city below. The sun painted the sky orange and pink, but her little voice had gone from whispering to screaming, danger. 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 She had no proof, only instincts, and tomorrow, she would finally meet the woman who had captured her son's heart. The next evening, Margaret stood in the dining room, ensuring everything was perfect. The long table gleamed with her finest china, white plates edged in gold that cost more than most people's cars. Crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier. Fresh flowers filled the room with the scent of roses. Margaret wore a simple black dress and her favorite pearl necklace, the one Thomas had given her on their last anniversary. She touched the pearls, taking a deep breath. The doorbell rang. Margaret's heart jumped. She walked to the door. Daniel stood there, smiling. Beside him, Vanessa. Margaret's breath caught. Vanessa was stunning. Not just pretty, breathtaking. Long dark hair in perfect waves, glowing skin, a blue dress that matched her eyes. Small diamond earrings, a designer purse, and a smile that was flawless. Too flawless. Like it had been practiced 1,000 times in the mirror. "Mom, this is Vanessa," Daniel said proudly. "Vanessa, this is my mother, Margaret Blackwood." Vanessa stepped forward, extending her hand. "Mrs. Blackwood, it's such an honor to finally meet you. Daniel has told me so much about you. You're even more impressive in person." Margaret shook her hand, watching her carefully. Vanessa's grip was firm but gentle, soft, like she'd never lifted a heavy object in her life. "Please, call me Margaret," she said. "Come in. Dinner is ready." They entered the dining room and sat. Daniel at one end, Margaret at the other, Vanessa in the middle. The first course arrived, a creamy vegetable soup. "This is delicious," Vanessa said, smiling at Margaret. "You have an amazing chef." "Thank you," Margaret replied. "So, Vanessa, Daniel says you're an art consultant. How did you get into that?" Vanessa smiled again, perfect as ever. "I've always loved art. My parents took me to museums when I was little. I studied art history in college and fell in love with it. Now I help people find beautiful pieces for their homes. It's like matchmaking, but with paintings." She laughed, soft and melodic, like bells ringing. Margaret nodded. "And college?" she asked. "Where did you go?" "A small school on the East Coast. You probably haven't heard of it." Vanessa's smile never wavered, but Margaret noticed she didn't name the school. "Interesting. And your family? Are they in the art business too?" For a brief second, something dark flickered across Vanessa's face, but just for a moment. The smile returned. "My parents died a few years ago, car accident. I don't have siblings. It's just me now." Margaret's heart softened. She knew the pain of losing loved ones. "I'm so sorry," she said sincerely. "Thank you. It was hard, but I've learned to move forward. And meeting Daniel has brought joy back into my life." Vanessa reached across the table, taking Daniel's hand. "He's the best thing that ever happened to me." Daniel blushed but grinned. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me." Margaret watched them, holding hands. She saw the love in Daniel's eyes, but also how Vanessa's gaze shifted across the room. The chandelier, the paintings, the silver candlesticks, she was taking it all in, calculating, studying. The main course arrived, chicken with roasted vegetables and a delicate sauce. "So, Vanessa," Margaret asked, cutting her chicken, "what do you think about marriage? Do you want to get married someday?" Daniel choked on his water. "Mom." Vanessa laughed softly. "It's okay, Daniel. It's a fair question." She looked at Margaret. "Yes. I do want to marry. But only when I find the right person, someone who loves me for who I am, not what I have. Someone who will be my partner in life." "And what about children?" Margaret asked gently. "I'd love to have kids someday," Vanessa replied, her voice warm. "A big family, full of love and laughter. All the right answers. Too perfect." Vanessa had every answer prepared. They ate in silence for a moment. Then Vanessa leaned forward, her tone sincere. "Margaret, I want you to know something. I know Daniel comes from a wealthy family. I know people might assume I'm interested in him for his money, but that's not true. I fell in love with him because he's kind, funny, smart. He makes me laugh. He makes me feel safe. The money doesn't matter." Margaret set her fork down. "The money doesn't matter." Vanessa said it firmly. "I make my own money. I have my own career. I don't need anyone to take care of me. I just want someone to love." Margaret's eyes drifted over Vanessa's designer dress, the sparkling diamond earrings, the pristine handbag. If she was truly self-made, why did everything she owned look brand new and top tier? That little voice inside Margaret's head screamed louder, but she smiled. "That's good to hear," she said. "Daniel deserves someone who loves him for himself." The rest of dinner went smoothly. They spoke about art, travel, books. Vanessa was charming, laughed at Margaret's jokes, asked questions about her business, complimented the food, the house, everything. She was flawless. Too flawless. After dessert, Daniel and Vanessa stood at the door. "Thank you so much for dinner," Vanessa said, hugging Margaret. "I hope we can do this again soon. I really want to get to know you better." "Anytime," Margaret replied. She watched them walk to Daniel's car, watched him open the door for Vanessa, watched them drive away. Then she closed the door and stood alone in her massive, quiet house. Her gaze drifted back to Vanessa's empty chair at the dining table. Something didn't feel right. Margaret replayed every word Vanessa had said, the perfect answers, the tragic story about her parents, the insistence that money didn't matter. And then she remembered, when Vanessa spoke of her parents' death, her eyes didn't water. No blinking, no pause, no hesitation. She had delivered the story like a script. Most people, even years later, showed emotion when talking about losing loved ones. Vanessa had shown none. Alone in her mansion, Margaret studied the empty room. Perfect answers, perfect smile, perfect story. Something felt off. But she had no proof. Only a gnawing instinct in her gut. She considered calling someone to investigate Vanessa, but stopped herself. What would she tell Daniel? He already thought she was overprotective, suspicious. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe Vanessa truly loved him. Margaret touched her pearl necklace, steeling herself. She would watch. She would wait. But she would not investigate, not yet. If she was wrong, she might push Daniel away forever. If she was right, the truth would surface eventually. It always did. She turned off the lights and went to bed. The little voice in her head whispered all night, "Something's wrong. Something's wrong. Something's wrong." 2 weeks later, Daniel burst into Margaret's office, practically radiating excitement. "Mom." Vanessa said yes. "We're getting married." Margaret looked up from her desk, trying to smile, though it felt forced. "Congratulations, sweetheart. What are you thinking, next year? Spring, perhaps?" Daniel shook his head, eyes bright. "No, Mom. We don't want to wait. 3 months, maybe even sooner." "Why wait when you know it's right?" Margaret's stomach twisted. 3 months? Daniel, that's very fast. Planning a wedding takes time, and you've only known her 6 months. Maybe you should. "I knew you'd say that," Daniel interrupted, his smile fading. "I knew you'd find a reason to slow us down. I'm not rushing blindly, Mom. I know what I want. I know who I want to spend my life with." Daniel's voice hardened. "Just admit it, Mom. You don't like Vanessa." Margaret stood and began pacing, careful not to let anger or fear show. "Daniel, I barely know her. One dinner. How can I like or dislike someone I hardly know?" "Exactly." Daniel snapped. "You've already decided she's not good enough for me. Why do you always do this? Why can't you just be happy for me?" Margaret drew a slow breath. She had to tread lightly. Push too hard, and she'd lose him. "I am happy for you," she said quietly. "I just want to make sure you're making the right choice. Marriage is forever, Daniel. It's not something to rush into." "I'm not rushing. I know what I want." Daniel's gaze was filled with hurt and frustration. "I thought you'd understand. Dad proposed after just 4 months of dating, didn't he?" Margaret felt as though she'd been punched in the gut. "That was different." "How is it different?" she whispered. "Because we had nothing to lose," Daniel said. Margaret wanted to say, "Because we were poor, because no one wanted anything from us except love." But she bit back the words. "Your father and I, we were very young," she said instead. "We made mistakes. I just don't want you making the same ones." "Marrying Vanessa isn't a mistake," Daniel said, jaw tight. "She's the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I'm marrying her, with or without your blessing." He turned to leave. "Daniel, wait." But he was gone. The office door slammed behind him. Margaret sat alone, the city sprawling beneath her through the vast windows. Power, wealth, influence, yet she couldn't convince her own son to pause. She sank into her chair, head in her hands. That night, Daniel called. "Mom. I'm sorry I got angry," he said, voice calmer. "I know you're trying to protect me. You always have, but I need you to trust me. Vanessa is good. She's real. She loves me." Margaret closed her eyes. "I know you believe that," Daniel continued. "It's true. And I need you there, Mom, at the wedding. Walking me down the aisle. You're all the family I have. Please." How could she refuse her only son? "Of course, I'll be there," Margaret said softly. "I'll always be there for you." Daniel's voice cracked slightly. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything." After hanging up, Margaret sat alone in the dark, vast mansion. The house was too big, too empty, too quiet. She wanted to stop the wedding. She wanted to scream. She wanted to forbid it. But she would wait. Watch. And when the truth came, she would be ready. But she had no proof. No evidence. Just that gnawing feeling in her gut. And you couldn't stop a wedding just because of a feeling. The next 3 months passed in a dizzying blur. Vanessa orchestrated everything. She chose the venue, a massive, luxurious hotel in the heart of the city. She picked the flowers, thousands of white roses. She selected the food, the music, the decorations. Everything screamed perfection. And everything was expensive. Daniel paid for it all, so thrilled he barely noticed the numbers climbing on his bank statements. Margaret noticed. And she noticed more. Vanessa never spoke of old friends, college roommates, childhood companions, no one. She always steered conversations away from her past. Questions about her career earned vague, fleeting answers. Questions about her family were deftly avoided. Margaret caught Vanessa's calculating gaze on Daniel's watch, his designer suits, his luxury car. Everything was measured, evaluated, priced in her eyes. Whenever Margaret tried to voice her concerns, Daniel became defensive. "You're imagining things, Mom. You're paranoid. You just don't want me to be happy." So Margaret stayed silent. She smiled when she was supposed to smile. She attended the wedding planning meetings, nodded politely, but inside, that voice kept screaming, "Danger, danger, danger." Finally, the wedding day arrived. A radiant Saturday in June. Sunshine spilled across the hotel's grand ballroom, adorned with white roses and glimmering gold ribbons. 300 guests filled the seats, business partners, politicians, celebrities, all people from Daniel's elite world. Margaret sat in the front row, her navy blue dress elegant, her pearl necklace resting against her chest. The music began. Bridesmaids in pink glided down the aisle. Then Vanessa appeared. A vision. A princess from a fairy tale. Her gown shimmered with thousands of tiny crystals. The veil floated behind her like a delicate cloud. Her bouquet of white roses completed the picture. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras clicked furiously. "She's beautiful," someone whispered. Margaret's chest tightened. "She's won," she thought. Vanessa reached the front where Daniel waited, tears of joy streaming down his face. He looked at her as if she were the only person in the universe. The priest began. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." Margaret's fingers gripped the edge of her seat. She wanted to leap up, to scream, "Stop. Don't do this." But what could she say? I have a bad feeling about her. Everyone would think she was a crazy, jealous mother. If anyone has reason why these two should not be married, speak now or forever hold your peace, the priest intoned. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Margaret. She opened her mouth, and nothing came out. She looked at Daniel, radiant and trusting, and closed her mouth. "Very well," the priest continued. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Daniel kissed Vanessa. Applause and cheers erupted. Margaret sat frozen, watching her fears come true, powerless. At the reception, Vanessa laughed, danced with Daniel, thanked everyone, performed perfectly. Margaret lingered at the edge of the room, silent. The voice in her head had quieted. What was the point now? It was too late. The marriage was done. All she could do was hope she was wrong. After the wedding, things shifted. Daniel and Vanessa moved into a sprawling penthouse downtown, one of the city's most expensive. Vanessa filled it with lavish furniture, designer curtains, and original art worth more than most people made in a year. Isn't it amazing, Mom? Daniel said during Margaret's first visit. Vanessa has incredible taste. Margaret walked through the rooms, taking in the luxury. It's very nice, she said quietly. How much did all this cost? Daniel waved it off. Don't worry, Mom. We can afford it. Margaret worried anyway. She knew the numbers. She saw the speed at which Vanessa was spending. Dresses, shoes, jewelry, spa treatments, personal trainers, chefs, housekeepers, the list grew longer each week. Daniel barely noticed. Or perhaps he didn't care. So happy to have Vanessa as his wife, he gave her whatever she wanted. Margaret tried once. Daniel, maybe you and Vanessa should talk about a budget. I know you have money, but... I said don't worry, Mom, he interrupted, laughing. Vanessa isn't spending too much. She deserves it. She makes me happy. Isn't that what matters? Margaret bit back her words. She wanted to say, making you happy shouldn't cost $500,000 in 6 months. But each time she questioned Vanessa, Daniel drifted away a little more. Dinners dwindled from weekly to monthly to every 2 months. Phone calls vanished. Visits were postponed with excuses. Vanessa isn't well, too busy, next week maybe. It was like Vanessa was slowly severing the bond between mother and son, snip by snip, and Margaret could do nothing. 1 year passed, then 14 months, then 16. Then one cold December morning, at 6 a.m., Margaret's phone rang. Already awake in her office, she answered without looking. Hello, Mrs. Blackwood? A woman's voice, trembling and sobbing. Mrs. Blackwood, this is Vanessa. Something terrible, it's Daniel. Margaret froze. What happened? He collapsed this morning. I called 911, but you need to come to the hospital. Please, hurry. Margaret didn't remember the drive. One moment she was in her house, the next she was bursting through the emergency room doors. My son, she gasped to the nurse at the desk. Daniel Blackwood. Where is he? The nurse's face drained of color. I'll get the doctor. A young doctor appeared, serious and sorrowful. Mrs. Blackwood. I'm so sorry. We tried everything. But, no. He passed about 30 minutes ago. His heart just stopped. Margaret's knees threatened to buckle. That's impossible, she whispered. He's healthy, he exercises, he eats well, he's only 29. Sometimes these things happen, the doctor said gently. A sudden cardiac event, an undetected heart condition. It's rare. Margaret followed him to a small room. On the bed lay Daniel, her son, her world. He looked asleep. Peaceful. Until she touched his hand. Cold. Ice cold. Margaret stood there, gripping his hand, frozen. No tears. No scream. Nothing. A statue of grief, unable to comprehend the reality of her loss. Behind her, footsteps echoed. Then came the sound of crying. Vanessa rushed into the room and collapsed over Daniel's body. No, my husband, my love, why did you leave me? She wailed, her voice loud and dramatic. Nurses hurried in, trying to comfort her. Someone handed her tissues. Another brought water. But Margaret didn't move. She stood frozen, still holding Daniel's cold hand. And then she noticed it. Vanessa was sobbing, shaking, making all the right sounds. But when Margaret looked closer, there were no tears. Her eyes were completely dry. She was pretending. In that instant, Margaret's grief shifted into something darker, something sharp, burning, and cold. A healthy 29-year-old man doesn't just die in his sleep. Not without a reason. Margaret looked at Daniel's peaceful face, then back at Vanessa's fake performance. And suddenly, that voice, the one that had been warning her for 18 months, became clear. Crystal clear. Vanessa killed him. Margaret didn't know how she knew. She had no proof. But she felt it deep in her bones, in her blood, in every part of her. Vanessa had killed her son. And Margaret was going to prove it. The funeral was scheduled for 1 week later. 7 days. That was all the time Margaret had to uncover the truth before they buried Daniel forever. The very next day, Margaret sat in her office across from Marcus, her most trusted assistant. He had worked for her for 15 years, sharp, loyal, and skilled at uncovering secrets people tried to hide. "I need you to investigate Vanessa," Margaret said, her voice calm but ice cold. "I want to know everything about her." She leaned forward. "And I mean everything." Marcus pulled out his notebook. "What exactly are you looking for, Mrs. Blackwood?" "The truth." Margaret's eyes hardened. "The doctors say Daniel died of sudden heart failure." But Daniel was healthy. He had checkups every 6 months. His heart was fine. Marcus paused. "You think something about his death isn't right?" "I know it isn't," Margaret said firmly. "I want his medical records. Every detail. Toxicology reports. Everything they found in his body." "That may be difficult," Marcus replied carefully. "Those records are private." Margaret didn't hesitate. "I don't care if it's difficult. I don't care if it's expensive. And I don't care if you have to bend the rules. Get them." Marcus nodded. "Understood." "What else?" "I want her past," Margaret continued. "Where she really came from. Where she actually went to school. Who her parents really are." "She told us they died in a car accident," Margaret added. "I want proof. Death certificates. Police reports." Margaret walked to the window, staring out at the gray city. "And I want her relationships," she said quietly. "Vanessa is 28. She didn't just appear out of nowhere. Find the men she dated before Daniel, and find out what happened to them." Marcus hesitated. "You think she's done this before?" Margaret turned slowly. "Yes. I don't think my son was the first wealthy man Vanessa targeted. And I don't think the others ended well." Marcus wrote quickly. "I'll start immediately. But Mrs. Blackwood, if Vanessa really did something, this could be dangerous." Margaret's expression didn't change. "Let her find out." Her voice dropped. "I'm not afraid of her. She should be afraid of me." After Marcus left, Margaret sat alone in silence. She pulled out her phone and opened Daniel's last message. It was sent 3 days before he died. "Mom, can we have dinner this weekend? I miss you. Love you." Margaret had replied. "Maybe next week, sweetheart. I have a big deal closing." Next week never came. Margaret closed her eyes. A single tear slid down her cheek, the first since Daniel died. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there." Her voice hardened. "But I'm here now. And I'm going to fix this. I promise." For the next 3 days, Marcus worked nonstop. Calling favors. Paying for information. Digging through records, files, and hidden databases. Piece by piece, the truth began to surface. On the 3rd day, he arrived at Margaret's house, exhausted, carrying a thick folder. "You were right," he said quietly. "About everything." Margaret's heart pounded. "Tell me." Marcus opened the file. Vanessa's real name is Vanessa Cole. She didn't attend some elite college, she dropped out of community college after one semester. Margaret's jaw tightened. Her parents aren't dead either. They're alive, living in a trailer park in Nevada. I spoke to them. They haven't heard from her in 8 years. Margaret's hands curled into fists. She lied about everything. Marcus nodded grimly. There's more. He pulled out additional documents. I found 3 men from her past. All wealthy. All dated her for less than 2 years. And all of them are dead. Margaret felt the room spin. Dead, how? The first, Michael Peterson. Died 5 years ago. Heart attack. He was 32. The second, James Crawford. Died 3 years ago. Sudden illness. Doctors couldn't explain it. His organs failed. The third, Robert Chin. Died 18 months ago, right before Vanessa met Daniel. Cause of death, unexplained heart failure. Marcus looked up. All of them left her money or property. Margaret's stomach twisted. 3 men. All young. All healthy. All gone. Marcus pulled out one final report. I also got Daniel's medical records, he said. The hospital ran a standard toxicology test, but they weren't looking for anything unusual. Margaret leaned forward. And? I had a private lab retest the samples. He paused. They found traces of digitalis. Margaret frowned. What is that? A drug derived from foxglove plants. In small doses, it treats heart conditions. But in high doses, it causes heart failure. Margaret's breath caught. And the worst part, Marcus added, it's extremely hard to detect. It looks like a natural heart attack. Margaret stood up, shaking with rage. She poisoned him. It appears so, Marcus said. Given over time, small doses could weaken him. Make him feel tired, sick. He'd think it was stress or illness. Then one final dose would stop his heart, Margaret finished. Marcus nodded. Exactly. Margaret grabbed her phone. I'm calling the police. Wait. Marcus raised his hand. We don't have enough yet. She froze. What do you mean? The digitalis traces are minimal. A good lawyer could argue contamination. And the other deaths, suspicious, yes, but not proof. Margaret's voice sharpened. Then what do we need? We need her to slip, Marcus said. We need a mistake. Or a confession. Margaret went silent. Then she thought about the funeral. In 4 days, hundreds of people would gather. Vanessa would play the grieving widow. She would cry those fake tears. She would accept sympathy and inherit everything Daniel left behind. Unless Margaret stopped her. I have an idea, Margaret said slowly. But it's risky. Marcus leaned in. What is it? Margaret's eyes turned cold, filled with determination. We're going to use the funeral. Marcus frowned. How? Margaret's voice dropped to a whisper. Vanessa thinks she's won. She thinks no one suspects her. A pause. But in front of everyone, we're going to make her confess. The next morning, Margaret made 3 crucial calls. The first was to Detective Sarah Martinez, the police detective Margaret had helped years ago when the detective's mother needed an expensive surgery. Margaret had covered the cost, asking for nothing in return. Now, she needed a favor. Detective Martinez, I need your assistance, Margaret said, her tone calm but firm. I believe my son's wife killed him. I have evidence, but I need the police present when I confront her. Mrs. Blackwood, if you truly have proof of murder, you should bring it to the station, the detective replied. There's no time. The funeral is in 3 days. Once it's over, Vanessa will inherit everything and vanish. Please, trust me. Be at the funeral with backup. I'll show you everything then. There was a pause. Finally, Detective Martinez said, "All right. I'll be there, but this better not be a wild goose chase." "It isn't. I promise," Margaret replied. The second call was to David Kim, a tech expert specializing in audio and video equipment for investigations in courtrooms. "David, I need you to set up hidden cameras and microphones at my son's funeral," Margaret said. "I need to capture everything that happens." "Can you do it?" "Of course, Mrs. Blackwood," he said cautiously. "But recording people without their knowledge is—" "I don't care about the law right now," Margaret interrupted. "I care about justice. My son is dead, and his killer is walking free. Will you help me or not?" David sighed. "I'll help." "Where's the funeral?" "The Grand Hotel ballroom. You'll have access to set up the night before." The third call was the hardest. Margaret dialed Vanessa. The phone rang once, and Vanessa picked up immediately. Her voice sounded soft, sorrowful. "Hello, Vanessa. It's Margaret." "Oh, Margaret," Vanessa sniffled, as though she'd been crying. "I'm so glad you called. I've been lost without Daniel. I don't know what to do." Margaret forced herself to stay calm. Her hands itched to scream at her, to call her a liar, a murderer. Instead, she spoke gently. "I know this is difficult," she said. "I was wondering if you'd like to speak at the funeral. Share a few words about Daniel. People would like to hear from you." "Really?" Vanessa's voice was surprised. "You want me to speak?" "Of course. You were his wife. You knew him better than anyone. I think it would be beautiful if you shared your memories of him." "Thank you, Margaret. That means a lot. I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but I hope we can support each other during this terrible time." "Yes," Margaret said evenly, "I hope so, too." After hanging up, Margaret sat perfectly still, her hands trembling. She had just invited the woman who murdered her son to speak at his funeral. She had pretended to be kind, had given Vanessa a sense of safety, because that's when people make mistakes. That's when the truth slips out. The night before the funeral, David Kim arrived at the Grand Hotel. He carefully placed tiny cameras in corners of the ballroom and hid microphones within the floral arrangements on stage. "We'll capture everything, audio and video," he told Margaret. "Whatever happens tomorrow, there will be proof." "Good," she said. "Thank you." That night, Margaret couldn't sleep. She sat in Daniel's childhood bedroom, preserved exactly as it had been. His baseball trophies still lined the shelf. His books were neatly stacked on the desk. His photos still hung on the walls. Margaret picked up a picture of Daniel at age 7. His 2 front teeth were missing, and he grinned at the camera, clutching a toy car. "Tomorrow," she whispered to the photo, "I'll make her pay for what she did to you. I promise." She set the photo down and pulled out the brown envelope Marcus had given her. Inside were all the documents, Daniel's medical records showing traces of digitalis in his blood, death certificates of the 3 men who had died after dating Vanessa, and proof of every lie she had told, about her parents, her education, her past. There was one final piece. Marcus had found a witness that very morning, Linda Chin, sister of Robert Chin, the 3rd man who died. She had reached out after hearing of Daniel's death. "I always knew Vanessa killed my brother," Linda had told Marcus. "But I couldn't prove it. The police said it was natural causes." Robert was careful. He would never just die like that. Linda had agreed to come to the funeral. She was ready to confront Vanessa if Margaret needed her. Margaret tucked the envelope into her purse. Everything was in place. Tomorrow, the truth would be revealed. Tomorrow, justice would be served, or she would risk losing everything trying. The next day, Margaret stood at the front of the funeral hall, staring down at the coffin that held her only son. Hundreds of mourners filled the room, reporters, cameras, politicians, everyone who mattered had come to say goodbye to Daniel Blackwood. In the front row, Vanessa sat in her black dress, dabbing at her dry eyes with a white tissue. Margaret's hand gripped the brown envelope in her purse, which contained every answer, every piece of proof. The priest concluded his opening prayer and looked toward Margaret. "Mrs. Blackwood has asked to speak before we hear from Daniel's wife." Margaret walked slowly to the microphone. Her heart pounded in her chest. She scanned the room. Detective Martinez stood near the back with two other officers. David Kim was in the corner, checking that the cameras were recording. And Vanessa sat in the front row, those fake tears still in her eyes. "Thank you all for coming," Margaret began, her voice strong and unwavering. "My son Daniel was a good man, kind and trusting. Sometimes, perhaps, too trusting." Vanessa shifted nervously. "Daniel believed people were good," Margaret continued. "He believed in love. He believed that if you gave someone your heart, they would cherish it." She paused. The room fell completely silent. "But sometimes," she said, her voice sharpening, "people take advantage of that trust. Sometimes, they pretend to love you when all they really love is your money." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People whispered to one another. Vanessa rose abruptly. "Mrs. Blackwood, this isn't the right time." "Sit down, Vanessa," Margaret said coldly. "I'm not finished." Vanessa's face paled, but she sat back down. Margaret pulled the envelope from her purse and held it high. "My son did not die of natural causes," she announced. "Daniel was murdered, poisoned. And I have proof." The room erupted. People leapt to their feet. Reporters surged forward. Voices shouted, questions flying in all directions. "Murder? What proof? Is this true?" Vanessa stood again, white as a ghost. "This is insane. Margaret, you're grieving. You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying," Margaret cut in, her voice icy. "And I have proof." She pulled out the first document. "This is Daniel's toxicology report. It shows traces of digitalis in his blood. Digitalis is a poison that causes heart attacks." Another paper followed. "This is a record of all medications in your apartment. You had digitalis, Vanessa. Why would you keep heart medication when neither of you had heart problems?" Vanessa's mouth opened and closed, no words forming. Margaret continued. "And that's not all. My investigators found that you lied about everything. Your parents aren't dead, they're alive in Nevada. You didn't go to college, you dropped out after one semester. You were never actually an art consultant. That was all a lie." The crowd gasped. Flashbulbs popped. Every eye in the room swung toward Vanessa. "Stop this!" Vanessa shouted, her voice trembling. "You're trying to ruin me because you never liked me. You never wanted Daniel to marry me." "You're right," Margaret said, her tone calm but cutting. "I didn't want him to marry you because I sensed something was wrong. My instincts warned me you were dangerous. And I was right." Margaret held up 3 more papers. "These are death certificates. Michael Peterson died 5 years ago. James Crawford died 3 years ago. Robert Chin died 18 months ago. All of them were your boyfriends, Vanessa. All of them were wealthy. And all of them died young, of sudden heart problems." The room fell completely silent. Everyone stared at Vanessa, horror written on their faces. "And all of them," Margaret continued, "left you money in their wills, just like Daniel did." Vanessa's expression hardened. The sad widow act vanished. Her eyes became cold, sharp, dangerous. "You can't prove any of this," she hissed. "Those men died of natural causes. The doctors said so. And even if Daniel had digitalis in his blood, that doesn't prove I gave it to him." "You're right," Margaret said evenly. "Which is why I brought someone else to speak to you." She nodded to the back of the room. A woman stood. A Chinese woman in her 30s, short black hair. "This is Linda Chin," Margaret said. "Robert's sister." Linda walked to the front. Her hands shook slightly, but her voice was steady. "I knew you killed my brother," Linda said, locking eyes on Vanessa. I told the police, but they didn't believe me. They said Robert died of natural causes, but I knew better. He was healthy. He exercised, he ate well, then he met you. Linda's voice grew louder, tinged with grief and rage. After he started dating you, he got sick. Tired all the time. Weak. The doctors couldn't figure it out. And then one day, his heart just stopped. Just like that. Tears ran down her face. You killed him. And when you inherited his money, you disappeared. I tried to find you, but you were gone. And now, you've done it again. You killed this woman's son, just like you killed my brother. Vanessa's face twisted with fury. This is ridiculous. You have no proof. None of this would hold up in court. Maybe not, Margaret said quietly. But I don't need a court right now. I just need the truth. Margaret stepped closer to Vanessa. Did you poison my son? Did you kill Daniel to get his money? No. Vanessa shouted, but her voice was too loud, too desperate. Then explain the digitalis, Margaret pressed. Explain why 3 of your ex-boyfriends are dead. Explain why you lied about everything, your parents, your education, your entire life. I don't have to explain anything to you. Yes, you do, Margaret's voice cracked with emotion. You took my son from me. My only child. He loved you. He trusted you, and you killed him. The room was silent. Every eye was on Vanessa, waiting for her response. She scanned the crowd, saw the cameras, the police officers moving closer. She realized she was trapped. Then something inside her snapped. Vanessa laughed, a cold, bitter laugh that made everyone's skin crawl. You want the truth, she said, her voice hard and merciless. Fine. Yes. I killed him. I killed Daniel. I killed Robert. I killed James. I killed Michael. All of them. Gasps filled the hall. Someone screamed. But Vanessa continued, unable to stop herself. They were all the same. Rich, stupid men who thought they were special. They thought I loved them. They thought they were different. But they were just wallets to me. Easy targets. Give them a pretty smile, tell them what they wanted to hear, and they'd hand over everything. Their money, their trust, their lives. Daniel was the easiest, Vanessa said, venom dripping from her words. So desperate for love. So desperate to believe someone wanted him for more than his money. Pathetic. Margaret's chest ached, as if stabbed, but she stayed rooted to the spot. So you admit it, Margaret said softly. You murdered my son. Vanessa smiled, a cold, terrifying smile. Yes. And you know what? He never even suspected. Not once. Even as he was dying, his heart failing, he looked at me with those trusting eyes and said, I love you. What an idiot. Margaret's hands clenched into fists, every fiber of her body screaming to strike. But she stayed still. Detective Martinez was already stepping forward with handcuffs. Vanessa Cole, the detective said, you're under arrest for the murder of Daniel Blackwood. You have the right to remain silent. Vanessa's smile vanished. Her eyes widened in realization. Wait, no. I didn't mean. Too late, Margaret said coldly. You confessed in front of 300 witnesses. It's all on camera. 2 officers grabbed Vanessa's arms. She screamed, struggled, cursed. You set me up, she shrieked at Margaret. You tricked me. Yes, Margaret said, her voice icy. Just like you tricked my son. The police dragged Vanessa out, her screams echoing. The room remained silent, stunned. Margaret walked slowly to Daniel's coffin and placed her hand on the smooth wood. I got her, she whispered. Justice is coming, my sweet boy. Justice is coming. Finally, Margaret allowed herself to cry. The funeral ended without a burial. The police needed to run further tests, gather evidence for trial. Back in her empty mansion, Margaret wandered through quiet, shadowed rooms. Daniel was gone. Really gone. And even though his killer had been caught, it didn't bring him back. Nothing could. Margaret sat in the dark living room, holding a photo of Daniel. Calls and messages flooded in, reporters, friends, business partners, but she ignored them all. 3 days later, Marcus arrived. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said gently, "the police finished their investigation. They found digitalis pills hidden in Vanessa's jewelry box. They found records showing she'd been studying poisons for years. Everyone from her past, friends, co-workers, neighbors, says the same thing. She was obsessed with money and would do anything to get it." Margaret nodded slowly. "And the other men? Michael, James, Robert?" "The police are reopening all 3 cases. With Vanessa's confession and the new evidence, they're treating all 3 deaths as murders. She'll be charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder." Margaret exhaled slowly, a small measure of relief washing over her. Justice, at last, was underway. "Good," Margaret whispered, her voice quiet but firm. Marcus sank into the chair across from her. "Mrs. Blackwood, you did it," he said softly. "You brought justice for Daniel. You stopped a killer before she could hurt anyone else." Margaret shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "But Daniel is still gone, Marcus. I was right about Vanessa from the start. The first time Daniel told me about her, I felt something was wrong. I just knew it in my bones. And I didn't act. I let him marry her anyway." "You couldn't have stopped him," Marcus replied gently. "Daniel was an adult. He made his own choices." Margaret's voice rose, raw with guilt. "I should have investigated her before the wedding. I should have shown Daniel who she really was. Maybe if I had, he'd still be alive." She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. "This is my fault. I failed him. I failed my son." Marcus moved closer, placing a hand on hers. "Listen to me, Mrs. Blackwood. This isn't your fault. Vanessa is a professional. She's been doing this for years, manipulating people, hiding her tracks. Even if you'd investigated her before the wedding, she might have covered her tracks so well you wouldn't have found anything." Margaret shook her head. "But I should have tried harder." "You did try," Marcus said firmly. "You warned Daniel. You spoke up. You expressed your concerns. But he was in love. And when people are in love, they don't always listen to reason. That's human, not a failure." Margaret wiped her tears. "Then why does it hurt so much?" "Because you're his mother," Marcus said softly. "Mothers always blame themselves when their children are hurt, even when it's not their fault." They sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Margaret asked, "Tell me about the trial. When does it start?" "Probably in 6 months," Marcus said. "But with Vanessa's confession on camera, the evidence we collected, and witnesses from her past, the prosecutor says it's a nearly airtight case. She's going to spend the rest of her life in prison." Margaret nodded. "Good. I want to be there. I want to look her in the eyes when they sentence her. Make sure I get a seat in the front row." 6 months later, Margaret sat in a courtroom, dressed in a simple black dress and pearls. Across from her, Vanessa wore an orange prison jumpsuit. Her hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, her makeup gone, her once beautiful features pale and defeated. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The prosecutor played the video of Vanessa's confession at the funeral. Experts explained how digitalis works. Evidence of the poison found in Vanessa's apartment was presented. Linda Chin and other witnesses testified about the suspicious deaths of Vanessa's previous boyfriends. Vanessa's lawyer tried everything, arguing Margaret manipulated her, claiming the evidence was planted, but it wasn't enough. After 2 weeks, the jury went to deliberate. Less than 3 hours later, they returned. "We find the defendant, Vanessa Cole, guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder." The courtroom erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously. People gasped, cheered, some cried. Margaret stayed still, her eyes fixed on Vanessa, who sat emotionless, staring ahead like a doll whose battery had died. The judge banged his gavel. Order! Order in the court! Vanessa Cole, you have been found guilty of murdering 4 innocent men for financial gain. These were calculated, cold-blooded killings. You showed no remorse. Therefore, I sentence you to 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. You will spend the rest of your natural life in prison. As Vanessa was led away, her eyes met Margaret's for a brief moment. Margaret expected satisfaction, maybe even relief, but she felt nothing. No sentence could bring Daniel back. Life went on, but everything felt different. Margaret returned to her companies, business meetings, and high-stakes deals, but the mansion felt too empty, the office too cold, the cars and jewelry meaningless. The person she had built it all for was gone. 3 months later, Margaret drove to the cemetery, carrying fresh white roses, Daniel's favorite. She knelt at his grave and read the headstone. Daniel Thomas Blackwood, beloved son taken too soon. Hi, sweetheart, she whispered, placing the roses carefully. I'm sorry I haven't visited in a while. Work got in the way. The wind is gentle tonight, birds are singing. She traced the cold marble with her fingers. Vanessa is in prison. She won't hurt anyone again. I made sure of that. Margaret sat in the grass beside the grave, ignoring her dress getting dirty. I keep thinking about what I could have done differently. I should have investigated Vanessa before you married her. I was afraid you'd hate me, afraid I'd lose you. And I lost you anyway. Tears streamed down her face. I'm so sorry, Daniel. I couldn't protect you. I failed you. You were my whole world. She cried until her tears ran dry. As the sun set, she stood and brushed off her dress. I love you, my sweet boy. I always will. Driving away, she looked over the city, her mind made up. 1 year after Daniel's death, Margaret stood before a brand new building in the city center. A sign above the door read, "The Daniel Blackwood Foundation, protecting families from financial predators." Half her fortune had gone into creating the foundation. It helped families investigate partners before marriage, educated young people about gold diggers and scammers, and provided free legal support to those suspecting manipulation. We help people see the truth before it's too late, Margaret told the reporters. We teach people to trust their instincts. We protect them from people like Vanessa. Inside, a wall honored Vanessa's other victims, Michael Peterson, James Crawford, Robert Chin, with Daniel's smiling photo at the center. Their deaths will not be forgotten, Margaret said softly. Their stories will save lives. She stood alone before Daniel's picture. I couldn't save you, she whispered, but maybe I can save someone else's child. That's how I honor your memory. She touched the photo gently. I've learned that a mother's instinct is real. That voice inside telling you something is wrong exists for a reason. I should have listened sooner. And even when we fail, when we lose everything, we can still choose to do something good with our pain. We can still protect others. Margaret smiled faintly. I think you'd be proud. Now, in your name, we will. Turning, she stepped into the sunlight. She would never stop missing Daniel. She would never stop wishing she could turn back time. The grief would remain, a scar on her heart, but she would live, fight, and protect others. Because that's what mothers do. They protect. They fight. They never give up. Even with broken hearts, even when their children are gone, a mother's love and instinct never die. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in my next.